All right, before we really get into the main 3.5 stuff on function transformations, I do want to give a brief review on something that the book calls Toolkit Functions. So these are essentially basic functions that you should be familiar with, okay? So whether that means you make yourself flashcards, whether that means you do a lot of homework problems until you kind of really get used to them and get comfortable with them, or maybe you just graph them a lot until you become comfortable with them. But these are functions that that we will be assuming that you are familiar with. So let's review them real quick. So they're actually really well described in section 3.2. And here they are. So one of them is the constant function. This is like y equals 2 or f of x equals 5, where the function value is the same for everything. We have what's called the identity function, which is like y equals x. It's just a straight diagonal line, 45-degree angle. The absolute value function is another very common one. It just turns all the inputs into positive numbers. Okay, it looks like a V, and it's also diagonal as well. So like you have points 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and so on, like this. The next one's the quadratic function. We can graph this by hand. We can graph this with Desmos, but it just squares all the inputs. Be very careful when you're putting in negative numbers into this one. Like if I have -2 squared, that needs parentheses. When you square -2, it turns it into a positive number, right? For example, right, if f of x equals x squared and I plug in -2, it has to be written like this, not like this if you're using a calculator, okay? It should equal +4. So those are the kind of main toolkit functions that people are more familiar with, but these other ones are also very important as well, and we're going to be using them a lot in this class. And the next one's the cubic function. Parabola is x squared, cubic functions x cubed. It just cubes the inputs. The reciprocal function, 1 over x, it looks like this. It's kind of like, it's got an asymptote on the y-axis and an asymptote on the x-axis. We'll talk more about those later, but essentially an asymptote is just a line that the function gets really close to but never touches. So if you like extend this graph really far, it gets really close to the x-axis. It never quite touches it. The reciprocal squared function is 1 over x squared. Looks kind of like this. Very similar, just slightly different shape, and they're both positive. Square root function, notice that the domain is only non-negative x values. There's no function over here. It's kind of half of a sideways parabola. All right, we could turn it into a full parabola here, but this is just the top half. The cubed root function is like a sideways cubic function. And those are the toolkit functions. So be familiar with these. Maybe bookmark this. This is 3.2. As you're doing the 3.5 homework, you might want to go back to 3.2, domain and range. And here, let me show it so you can actually see it. 3.2 is where it shows all the toolkit functions. So this is a good opportunity for review as you're doing and having to use all these toolkit functions in 3.5. All right.